Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're tuning in. This is another episode of Tailgate Trash Talk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. Bentley, how you doing, man?
I'm great, dude. I'm great. I just learned that my picks were fantastic last weekend, despite my wallet not feeling those effects. But that's all right. This weekend, I'll probably bet with my picks, and we'll see how that works out for us.
Yeah, man, I remember last year on that note, I did that one week, and it was my worst week of the year.
Oh,
So
of
I
course
don't know
it was.
how. I literally, I think going in, it was like week 5 of last year, and I think going in, I was like, I don't know, something crazy, like 20 games over 500 or something like that. I had a really good start to the year, and then in week 5, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna bet every single one of my picks for a smallish dollar amount, and I had my worst fucking week of the year. So be
Nice,
advised,
nice.
karma might not be in your favor
Yeah, unfortunately,
if you do so. Vegas, I feel like Vegas, they just know. Vegas knows, and somehow it always goes in the house's favor. Speaking of Vegas, they fucking cleaned up this weekend on a weekend that we talked about last week, right? There weren't a ton of like super intriguing matchups. There weren't a ton of ranked on ranked matchups, but we did get a couple of upsets and we got a couple of lines that were pretty heavy in the public eye that ended up going the other way. So Vegas kind of cleaned up this past weekend,
yeah.
at least on the spreads. So house always fucking wins. They're building another bridge or building another fucking casino out there in Vegas on the public
Always, always.
But let's jump right into it, man. Week 3, this is kind of how it worked out. As you mentioned, you had a really good week. Doubled up, 8 games over 500 for you. I ended up 14-10 on the week. We still combined, right? 30 and 18 on the week. Not too bad. If you're betting along with us, you should be doing all right. I know I haven't bet all my picks and haven't made all that much money on my own picks, so maybe I should start. But what's a game, one of these games that kind of stuck out to you, one that you want to talk maybe a little more about, highlight? I know we had a couple upsets this past weekend, but what kind of game, what game really stuck out to you? Do you want to tear the Band-Aid off first? You want to
Yeah,
jump
we
into
can
it?
do that.
You
We
want to
can
jump
tip
right
the
into
band.
it?
Yeah, we may as well. I got another one after this that I got lined
Okay.
up, but we may as well since we're here, right?
Yeah, we
It,
might as well jump right into it.
it
South
was.
Carolina goes into Athens.
Mhm.
We've seen this story before where they go in and they knock off a high-ranked Georgia team. I believe they were number 1 back in 2019 as well,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Going to Athens, play them tough. 11-point lead at half, looking really good. Talk to me about the game here. You had to be feeling really good at halftime.
I did. I had like 4 or 5 people text me, and I just was like, "Shut the hell up! Stop talking about it." I don't want to think about it right now. I'm not looking at my phone. I haven't moved on the couch. I'm in this spot. I need more water, but I'm frightful for my life to get up. Turns out none of that fucking mattered because we came
Yeah,
back out in the
yeah.
second half and looked like we were running that Satterfield offense from last year, and that was abysmal, right? But like you mentioned, we had the 11-point lead at halftime, and they talked about it on the broadcast, and a lot of what it was Spencer Rattler getting the ball out of his hands quickly and horizontally, right? He's really known as a downfield passer, which he's been phenomenal at this year. I believe he's second right now in the SEC. Maybe no, he's third. Jade McDaniels is second, and then the kid from Vanderbilt is first, but he's played an extra game, right?
Yes.
So Spencer Rattler third in the SEC in passing yards, right? So when you think about that, Xavier Legette, number 7 in the country in receiving yards, downfield threat, big receiver, reminds me a lot of like Alshon Jeffrey when he was there. Probably not as fast as Alshon, but whatever, different styles, but same kind of body type, right?
Big physical possession type guy.
Exactly. He can go up and high point the ball. Phenomenal receiver, right? But the bread and butter of our game was getting the ball horizontal, working the entire spread of the field, making those Georgia defenders run left and right and really tire them out. And we're able to get up and down the field a couple times. Now Georgia missed a field goal, which helped. They only had 4 possessions, right? They went punt, missed field goal. No, excuse me. They went punt, field goal, punt.
Missed.
Nope.
Okay, great.
They punted twice. They kicked a field goal, and then they went to halftime, and then they missed kick in the second half. Sorry.
That was in the second half.
Yeah, but they only had 4 possessions in the first half, right? Which is akin to the new clock rules,
Clock rules.
spreading the ball out, working it horizontally up and down the field, right? Which really worked for us. And then we came into halftime and decided that we wanted to start running the ball, which was great.
We're gonna scrap all that shit that worked in the first half.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Like now, Juice Wells did get hurt again. He re-aggravated the foot that he had surgery on, which really did, which it hindered our offense. Great, yikes. Okay, I think we see, but we'll talk again later. So Juice Wells going out really hindered our offense, right? But what the biggest hindrance to our offense is that we have a really good pass blocking offensive line and a terrible run blocking offensive line. Like I was saying, we're I believe 128th out of 130 FBS teams in overall rushing this year. Our leading rusher is a former wide receiver / quarterback who has 28 carries for 75 yards this season. Yeah. 75 yards is our leading rusher. This was an abysmal second half. We got shut out in the second half. It was terrible. And I was texting you during the game whenever it was going well, right? And I told you that I really loved this offense. And that was true in the first half. Rattler was 16 for 18. He was dropping dimes. He was slinging it left and right. And then he hit Leggett once or twice on the field for some big plays. He had a nice crossing route.
Third down conversions with his feet.
Yes, he was playing the game of his life. And then aside from the Tennessee game last year. Yeah. And then they just stopped doing that in the second half. And it's like, I don't know how to judge this game, whether we got out-talented by Georgia or whether we just stopped doing the things that we needed to do that got us that 11-point lead in the first half, truthfully. But I came out of there, two things. South Carolina has a phenomenal passing game. Spencer Rattler is the quarterback we all expected him to be coming out of high school. He has ascended to that position. And two, Georgia can be got. They can be had.
Yeah, you mentioned the first half, and we talked about it in the office today, right? It looks like Georgia's not as fast as they've been the last couple of years on defense. They're still just as big in the middle, and I think South Carolina figured that out in the second half when I don't know what happened. Sometimes you can kind of panic when you're a heavy underdog playing against Goliath, right? When you're David against Goliath, essentially is what this was. Not to say South Carolina's David in the grand scheme, but in this scenario, they were David. It was 27-point spread. Georgia's two-time defending champs. It's Georgia. We all know about how many players they've put in the NFL the last 2 years, and they're probably going to put a dozen more in the next year, in the draft. But sometimes we see this sometimes where you start to give it back as opposed to just doing what got you there.
Yeah.
You see it with like prevent defenses at the end of games as well. Like just keep doing what you've been doing. It's been working to this point. Why try to fix it? Why try to make a change? And it did feel like it was kind of night and day with this South Carolina offense. And you mentioned it, right? Juice Wells was hurt. So did you really think you were just going to turn around, put it in the belly of the running back, and you were going to wear down Georgia? You were killing them sideline to sideline. Rattler was playing a great game, making great decisions. I think they let one get away, unfortunately, and in that, you don't get those opportunities very often, right? To have that opportunity and to let it slip away, it felt like South Carolina kind of shot themselves in the foot as opposed to Georgia. I don't think Georgia out-talented them in the second half to win this game. I think it does boil down to the fact that South Carolina made adjustments at half when they didn't really need to. Sometimes you can tinker just too much, right? You feel like you need to tinker or you need to change something because you're worried that Georgia's going to figure it out. I don't think that was going to happen in this game because you guys had that defense really maybe for the first time since they started this dynastic run that they're on. They were really on their back, their heels, right? Maybe you could say Bryce Young did it with Bama. But other than that, you haven't really seen Georgia play like they were in the first half. And in the defense, it was tentative. They weren't attacking. They weren't aggressive like they have been in the last couple years as they've made this run to 2 national titles. It feels like South Carolina was just like, well, maybe we should change things up to try to maybe go a little more conservative. You're not going to run the clock out, right? Even with the new clock rules, you're not going to run the clock out on the second half with a two possession game. It feels like they let one get away, unfortunately. And it would have been a beautiful feather in the cap for Beamer ball.
Yes.
You had the Tennessee game last year that, you really kind of put your stamp on the fact that, hey, Beamer ball's here and we're building around this program. If you could have put this feather in your cap, then you've really got something you can say, okay, South Carolina might be back here, baby.
Yep.
We might be building towards something big, and that's a recruiting tool, right? We knocked off Big Bad Georgia. Those things go a long way, and you can scheme up all you want, but college football is all about recruiting, and you're always thinking about how these things can impact potentially recruiting, not just the impact of this season in a vacuum, but the impact to the program potentially of a win like that could go a long, long way in recruiting.
The highest rated freshman in the SEC, I believe, maybe the country this week was left tackle.
Yeah,
his nickname is Tree, true freshman left tackle for South Carolina this weekend. So that was a shining spot there to have our true freshman stand up on the road, to steal a hockey term, stand on his head on the road against the number one team in the country.
That defensive front.
Yeah, love that.
Absolutely. All right, you said you had one more. Let's jump into it.
Yeah.
Highlight here.
Yeah, so Ohio State seems to have figured it out. I know they were playing Western Kentucky, who's, they were 2-0 coming into the game, but we all kind of understand what class we're talking about here when we talk about Western Kentucky. But Ohio State put up 35 points in the second quarter. That doesn't happen by accident. I'm not sure what the deal is. I was listening to Greg McElroy talk today, and he was talking specifically about the Alabama quarterback situation, he referenced whenever Jalen Hurts and Tua were both at Alabama, said Tua, when he first started, or when Jalen Hurts was starting and Tua was there as the backup, Jalen Hurts kind of was playing tentative and scared and didn't want to try to throw guys open because they're always looking over his shoulder, right? So the same thing kind of happened, I believe, at Ohio State. Kyle McCord came out in week 1 and made some mistakes. Week 2 didn't look great. They put in Devin Brown. They went 3 and out, and they gave the ball back to McCord. It's like, well, now Ryan Day has probably gone to Kyle McCord and been like, going into this week, he's like, hey, you're the number one. Don't worry about it, dude. Just throw it to Marvin Harrison every single time. We'll be all right. He's kind of instilled that confidence in him.
That's not a bad strategy.
It's not. They're like, hey, Marvin, just run really fast down the field, and Kyle throws
he's
to
a
him.
Different breed.
Yes, very much so. He's no Xavier Legette, but he's all right. But instilling the confidence in your quarterback, so he is not looking over the shoulder at a highly rated recruit behind him, wondering if I turn the ball over, am I going to get pulled, or vice versa, something like that. I think that this Ohio State offense, this was a week that they really, really needed to step on the throttle and ramp things up, because I'm sure we'll get into it. They're playing at Notre Dame this weekend, which is nothing to shake a stick at, right? Notre Dame's a good team this year. Yeah, they're a dog, right? 3-point line. Yep. But I think that Ohio State kind of came out and was like, hey, we're here to compete for the Big Ten this year. We are here to beat Michigan. They beat us 2 years in a row. We're ready to get back into the limelight, and I know they're in the playoff, but we're ready to put our stamp back on college football after a down couple of weeks and some people doubting us, right? So that was kind of a takeaway I had from last week.
Yeah, Ohio State, you just kind of wondered when they were going to figure it out, right? They got too much talent on that offense for it not to shine through. I think you're probably absolutely right. I've always stood by the adage. I don't remember who first said this, that I heard it, but I've always stood by it. When you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none, essentially, because you exactly how you put it. No matter who you start, they're going to be looking over their shoulder. They're not playing free. They're not playing loose. They're not just playing the game that they've clearly, if you're at Ohio State as a quarterback, you've done pretty well up to that point at that position. So, it's one of those things that I just always kind of look at it and say, it just makes too much sense, right? You have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. And maybe, like you said, right, Ryan Day may have gone to McCord and just said, hey, listen, it's your team. We're riding you. You're our Seabiscuit, and we're going to get this thing done. And yeah, just when in doubt, just launch it up there and find out where Marvin is and just throw it.
It was John Madden who said that, by the way.
It probably.
Yeah, he knows a thing or two about football.
Yeah, he knows a couple things about football. So, Yeah, that one's always just stuck with me though, man, because it always just makes it never fails. It never
Right.
fails in the NFL or college. If you've got two quarterbacks, you're gonna get shit quarterback play because they're always looking over their shoulder. You
Absolutely.
can't do the whole rotation. Harbaugh found out when he had McCarthy and McNamara, and knew he had to make a decision because it didn't get them where they wanted to get to. So it's just never fails. If you got two, you got none, and it looks like maybe Ohio State has figured this offense thing out, and they're going to be pretty dangerous because they're still goddamn good on defense. They still have fucking studs across that defensive line. They just keep churning out NFL pass rushers out of that defensive line.
They're better on defense than they are on offense, and
Yeah.
that's a team that scored 63 this weekend.
Points this past week.
Yep.
35 and a quarter in today's college football too, right? It's not the days of yore when every first down stopped the clock, you know.
Yeah.
All right, I wanted to kind of look at this Iowa Western Michigan matchup because it's been in the news. It's been played out a lot, I think, but this whole thing with the contract with the offensive coordinator and
head coach Kirk Ferentz.
Or yeah, right. They have to average, and the new offensive coordinator or Kirk, ends up losing his, his deal, right? So everything is kind of hinging on this new offensive coordinator fixing things, right? And it didn't look good for quite a bit in this game against a Western Michigan team that has no business being on the same field as Iowa, right? They are not recruiting the same. They're not recruiting from the same pool. They're not fielding the same team. And it was ugly. And then they got hot and it picked up. I want to ask you though, do you think it's impacting the team knowing that, like that they made it public that they have to average 25 points, or do you think the team is playing a little tight and maybe the second half of that game against Western Michigan loosens them up and we see a different team this weekend against Penn State? Because they've not looked the part on offense in the first 2 weeks. They've looked the part, right? The Iowa part that we're used to seeing.
Yeah.
But they haven't looked the part of a team that says we're turning over a new leaf and we're going to have an offense that's going to, put some butts in seats.
I would like to say that's probably the case and that this team just needs to kind of get into a rhythm. But it's Iowa. And like you said, they're playing Iowa football, right? They want to win. They want to win 20-14 every week and be happy with that. I don't think that them publicly stating that they need to average 25 a game has really had any real impact on this team. We say it all the time about professional athletes, and I think it's starting to trickle down into the lower ranks. These players are so locked in and are able to compartmentalize a lot of what's happening around them that they're just solely focused on winning games, right? So I don't really believe that the public nature of this the coach's clause in his contract is really affecting them. That being said, the first half of their schedule is probably the toughest. Yeah. And I expect them to pick it up after the Wisconsin game in mid-October, right? They close the season with home Minnesota, home Northwestern, home Rutgers, home Illinois, and at Nebraska. Like, those are 5 winnable games against opponents that are not going to be ranked. Wisconsin, who really knows what's going to happen, they're unranked this week, but I think we all kind of expect them with Luke Fickell there to finish in the top 25, I would assume. I don't think that the public nature of the contract is really affecting them. I think that they're just playing Iowa football, and that's kind of who they are.
That's fair. Speaking of Wisconsin, I'm glad you brought them up. Why aren't they running the football?
Oh, the dairy raid, dude. You haven't heard? Luke Fickell's bringing the dairy raid to Wisconsin. He wants to find his own Desmond Ridder.
I get it,
and throw the ball.
You've got the best running back in the country, and I don't think there's a handful of guys, right? There's not more than 5 guys you could put in the argument, right?
Sure.
He averaged 7 yards a tote this past weekend and got like 5 totes. What are we doing? I just don't understand, because that's Wisconsin football, right? This team is built for that. I understand Fickell's probably trying to recreate what he had in Cincinnati, and he probably looks at Wisconsin and says, I've got a better brand that I can recruit with than I had with Cincinnati. But when you've got that guy, who coming into the season, there was some chatter about him potentially in the Heisman conversation. Now, we all know, like, it's Caleb's to lose.
Mm-hmm.
But how are you not giving that dude more totes? I guess, yeah, it probably is just maybe a change in philosophy. Man, it's frustrating as an onlooker to see what they've got there, though. And I thought he had a chance to be like a Jonathan Taylor almost, what he did with Wisconsin there his last season.
Yeah, I mean they've got two guys within 4 carries total of each other. Like it almost seems like running back by committee at this point.
Yeah.
Which kind of further strengthens my thoughts of them just running a pass first, spread it out, air raid offense, which is what Luke Fickell ultimately wants to do, which is against everything that Wisconsin really stands for, honestly. But I mean, it in theory, it's going to be fun, right? Like
sure.
We know that Wisconsin is historically good. They're a solid program, and Luke Fickell is obviously a very good coach. He made the move, I assume, looking down the road, seeing that the Big Ten is going to be the conference alongside the SEC, obviously, to be a part of. And I think that he was like, look, Wisconsin, they have a recruiting base. They get anybody they want from, the central northern region of the country. And if I can find receivers to play and maybe steal a couple from like Wisconsin or from Michigan or Ohio State, then maybe I can recreate what I did at Cincinnati here in Madison.
Yeah, maybe. You struggle with Georgia Southern though.
Yeah, I look. They're it's year one. They're not off to a hot start. Yeah, they had that loss to Washington State on the road, in which they kind of got bully balled, which was shocking.
Yeah,
a Pac-12 team bully balling a Big Ten.
Yeah.
But it takes time, right? We see it every time there's a new coach, unless your name is Lincoln Riley and you bring over the best player in college football. It takes time for new coaches to build programs, to build cultures within that program.
Yeah. It's astounding to me.
Mm-hmm.
You got a guy he had 1,200 yards in back-to-back seasons, averaged 7 yards a tote in 2021, 5.5 yards a tote in 2022, and he's averaging 7 yards a tote this year. He's got 36 carries through 3 games in the season. I don't know. That's just one off. That wasn't a ranked matchup that we highlighted, but yeah, I mean, Corey, I think you're absolutely right? That you set up the pass with the run game, 5+ yards per carry, give him the rock. Set up for the big deep ball.
Yep.
All right. Last one I wanted to kind of talk about and highlight. Coach Prime's been in the news, and this game got really chippy between Colorado and Colorado State.
Yep.
Travis Hunter out for at least 3 weeks, lacerated liver on a play that one has no business in the game, has no place in the game. 2 should have resulted in an ejection. I was really disappointed in the moment, and I'm continuing to be disappointed in the fact that there's been no action after to take any sort of punishable offense and throw maybe a game suspension on. It's not good, and it was clear from the get-go that Colorado State was going to dirty this game up. They had, I think, 5 personal fouls in the first half, including the late hit on Travis Hunter. There was at one point, they had 4 guys, I think, that were on their first warning for unsportsmanlike. It's just, you can't have that. And there should have been probably half a dozen more flags thrown. The refs lost control of this game early. But I will say this. Prime said it after the game. This is the adversity that you needed to see Colorado go through and succeed in order to say, okay, yeah, maybe they've got something going here. They've got a tough stretch here of games, starting with this week against Oregon. But I liked what I saw, that they didn't give up. 98 yards to go with 1:20, I think, was on the clock when they got the ball there late. And Shedeur was the picture of calmness and just poised, got him down the field, tied the game up, going to overtime, and you overcome in double overtime against a very game Colorado State team that knew the rivalry game. You kind of knew they were going to try to get up for it. I didn't expect them to compete the way they did, but I do believe that the officiating had a huge hand in how Colorado State was able to build some of the momentum they built, because it got real chippy real early. They were able to muddy it up and dirty it up. Obviously, you take out maybe the best two-way player we've seen since Prime himself, right? Charles Woodson probably has a little bit to say about that, but I didn't like the way it was handled, but I do like at the end of the game that, this is a teachable moment and Prime's using it that way. And then the locker room speech from his mom was pretty awesome as well.
Yeah.
So I'm all in on Colorado. I'm all in on what Prime's doing and building. I'm curious your thoughts on this game, though.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway from this game was that the Colorado offensive line is not good. That's my number one takeaway. They have elite playmakers on the outside. Their freshman running back is very, very good. Shedeur Sanders, aside from poking their best defensive lineman in the eye, handled the pass rush from Colorado State pretty well. But he got hit a lot. He got put on the ground a bunch. He got hit after throws. That offensive line is going to get bullied by some teams, right? Oregon, they have coming up. Oregon might run the ball for like
dogs on the edge.
Yeah, Oregon might run the ball for like 250 yards and then give up, and then cause like 5 or 6 sacks. Like Oregon is going to dominate the trenches in this game, and it might get late early for Colorado on this season.
It could.
But I like the playmakers that Colorado has, right? Travis Hunter aside, that play obviously has no place in the game. Prime came out and had a very, very classy response, I thought, when he publicly said that, like, it's all good. He obviously said that I don't want to put words in his mouth, but we all saw the press conference that play has no place.
Yep.
This kid was just trying to make a play, right? Like, he made a mistake. It happens. I think that's the right thing to do. Yeah. Whether the hit was malicious or not, you can't harp on it. You got to move on.
Let us do that, right?
Exactly.
As the coach, right?
Let
us sit here and talk about how malicious it was.
Yeah. I love that the Colorado story is so much fun.
Yeah.
I think that all year long I've told people I have my doubts about them, and it's been well documented on this podcast that I have my doubts about this team. I did bite the cheese and bet on them to cover last week, and it didn't happen. Yeah. But, it kept me up until fucking almost 2 a.m. watching a college football game. Like, that's incredible, right? Who else does that?
Yep.
Unless you took a nap during the afternoon games and stayed up to watch a Hawaii home game one time, right. But that's my takeaway, right? Is the offensive line of this Colorado team has major flaws.
Yeah, they're going to have to scheme it up this week. They're going to have to rely on those NFL-level coaches that they've got there. Prime's done a good job of assembling a staff, but it's going to take all of their cunning this week to scheme it up and protect Shedeur from those edge rushers that Oregon has. They can get after the passer, and they've been able to this year because they've been able to score points and run away from teams early and just pin their ears back. If that happens in this game, Shedeur is probably going to take a pounding. You're going to have to stay with them early. You're going to have to be able to stay in manageable second and third downs. You've got to be able to move the ball. You have to be able to hand the ball off and get something out of it, whether it's, quick swing passes that are an extension of the run game, something to slow this defensive pass rush down, set up good screens. I will say that Shedeur is a really savvy passer when it comes to things like those screens and those bubble screens. He does a really good job of like selling it, holding it, wait until the last minute, letting the play develop. So if he can do that, and they can kind of get these pass rushers to have to hesitate for a moment, if they can hit some of these screens for, plays, maybe they're going to be able to do something. But I think you're absolutely right. Colorado State bullying your front five is a pretty stark wake-up call to the fact that you're going to have to figure it out. And I think we all knew coming into the season, right, that depth, especially along the offensive line, was going to be a challenge for them. But talent really on the offensive line is a challenge for them. And you can't build Rome in a day, right? I get it. It's one off season, but as much success as they had in the transfer portal, you kind of, if you're somebody behind that offensive line, maybe you were wishing they'd have done a little better in the transfer portal along the offensive line. But All right. Any other ones you want to highlight from week 3?
Yeah, I just have a couple of shout outs. We don't have to dive into it too quickly. Starting with that Colorado game, actually, now that we mentioned it, shout out that Colorado State quarterback,
Oh my
Fowler
God.
Nicolosi. That dude balled out. That dude had a freaking game coming into that hostile environment and playing his absolute ass off, dude, as a freshman. Shout out to that guy. That guy probably will transfer somewhere bigger next year.
Yeah, he got some eyes on him this past weekend.
Yeah, for real.
If Shedeur goes to the NFL, he might even end up just going down the road.
Hey, who knows, man? Who knows? It's only an hour drive from Fort Collins.
Exactly.
Also in that game, shout out Muhammad Kamara. That edge rusher for Colorado State. That dude, I'm not a scout, but it wouldn't shock me if that dude plays in the NFL next year. Yeah. Tough as nails. I think he came out 3 times for injury and got poked in the eye and still came back in and just balled out, right?
Yeah.
Another shout out Eli Drinkwitz, the Missouri coach, having the stones to go for the longest field goal ever in SEC history.
What a bomb!
Ever in SEC history. to just destroy my parlay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ever in SEC history.
61 to have the stones to even try it. That's unbelievable. Like, I get it. Yeah, you've probably in practice with the T been able to bomb 161 or 62. Mm-hmm. I'll say this though. What impressed me, I was up all night too, Aaron. Shout out to you, bud. Sticking it out with us, man. I think he's in the Central Time Zone though, so he doesn't get full.
Try again.
Yeah. You get partial credit, Aaron. But anyway, the thing that impressed me the most about that kick, I think it was good from like 64, 65.
Yeah. Oh, he nailed it.
The bar pretty fucking. There's some NFL heads that turned like, ooh. Is this the next Justin Tucker?
Yeah. But shout out Eli for having the balls to go for that kick and having a great game plan, right? Yeah. To hold Kansas State to 27 points. Missouri played their asses off. Missouri's a better team than But I actually saw after that game somebody. Yeah. So I forget who it was. Somebody on Twitter, my apologies for not crediting them, said that Missouri was the second best team in the SEC East and they could challenge Georgia for the division. No, South Carolina is the second best team in the East.
And they did challenge
Georgia. I also want to give a shout out to Michael Penix. Michael Penix is a true story of player development in college football. Yep. Him at Indiana was a very fun watch. Him at Washington is elite next level talent. He is the second best quarterback.
Indiana.
Yes. He's the second best quarterback in college football behind Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
And I would challenge anybody to find me someone better. Now, that being said, he closes the year with Southern California, Utah, Oregon State, and Washington State.
Yeah.
So, honestly, if he wins those 4 games to clear the season, put him in the Heisman watch. He's going to New York.
Yeah. I
believe I know I heard this today. He's the first Pac-12 quarterback to throw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns in each of their first 3 games. I probably said that wrong.
And that's a conference with some fucking prolific quarterback history.
Yes. Think of all the Oregon quarterbacks
and
the Southern California quarterbacks that have come through there.
Right.
Like the first one to go 403
Troy Aikman played at UCLA. Right?
Yeah, like those are some freaking dogs they got out there, man. Yeah. I think those were all of my shout outs from week 1. Or from week 1. What do I say? Week 3.
Week 3.
Quick shout out, and we can talk about this when we get to the Ole Miss game because it's very prevalent. I'll save it for the Ole Miss preview.
All right. I've only got one last shout out I want to give.
For it.
I love when guys don't have to think about standing up for their guys.
Mm-hmm.
And as the quarterback of the team, for you to be the one that's first to be in the face of that safety that took Travis Hunter out, I want to shout out Shedeur because that's 1, leadership, 2, that's having your guys back, and 3, that's showing stones and guys can rally behind that. So
sure,
I want to shout him out for that because he was the first person to be in that dude's face, giving him the fucking business.
Yep.
And yeah, that for me, I love that kind of shit because I always loved that when you get in a team atmosphere and you don't have to think about having your guys' back. And to me, that was a natural reaction from him that he automatically was invested in Travis Hunter, invested in his team, and jumped right down that guy's throat.
Yep.
All right, well, let's dive into week 4 then, man.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Ole Miss. Let's tear the Band-Aid off.
All
Let's
right.
talk about Ole Miss. Talk to me, bud.
All right, so there was a press conference that Lane Kiffin did this week, and I think I mentioned this to you today. Lane Kiffin gave a very interesting press conference. Obviously Lane Kiffin coached at Alabama under Nick Saban, so he's familiar with a lot of the defensive staff that is still there, right? Specifically the defensive coordinator and the defensive backs coach. So in this press conference, somebody asked Lane Kiffin about their strategy and going into the Alabama game and kind of what he saw from Alabama where they think they can have an advantage. And he said, yeah, some of my guys mentioned it, and I watched the tape, and I can confirm we don't think it was the defensive coordinator from Alabama calling the defensive plays last week. They think it was the defensive backs coach, which is just wild that Alabama, in a game where they had to win against South Florida, would give defensive play calling duties to their defensive back coach and instead of letting their defensive coordinator call the plays, right? If that is the case, Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin have already said that they're preparing an offensive game plan for the plays that were called by their defensive back or by the defensive backs coach, right? Because nobody knows for sure. Rather than, and forgive me for not knowing the DC's name, but the DC from Alabama, which is, I just thought that was very, very strange. That being said, I'm taking Ole Miss +7.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and we always know, like, Lane Kiffin's going to give it to you straight.
Yeah.
Like, he's maybe maybe the best interview in college football prior to this season. Now we got Prime, but Lane Kiffin's always a fun interview. He's goofy, has a lot of like mannerisms about him and one-liners that are it's fun. He's funny.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting. I don't know if he's trying to play some mind games with old Nicky S, but to say it like that the week before you play them, to say like, yeah, we're not even preparing for, it's Kevin Steele. I had to look it up, but
yeah,
we're not even preparing for him. We're preparing for the guy who's coaching the DBs, he's maybe 6th in the pecking order,
right?
On the defensive side of the ball, who was calling plays, we think. But I will say this, that is super fucking savvy and like attention to detail to be able to say that and be like, no, we think it's Joey back there who's coaching the defensive backs who was calling the plays because of X, Y, and Z. Like, to know your opponent to that level is it's phenomenal.
Wild.
And I'm with you. Ole Miss +7. Bama. They might lose outright, to be honest. Like, if I had to pick a straight money line winner, I'd be hard pressed not to pick Ole Miss because
I'm gonna bet it.
Yeah, I absolutely, and you're gonna get good juice on it because 7 points, But Bama at the quarterback position scares the living shit out of me, and they don't have Calvin Ridley and Devontae Smith and all them, get Jerry Jeudy and Mechie and all them guys. They're not coming out of the locker room to bail out Jalen Milroe and fucking Tyler Buckner, who looks just as bad as he did when he was at Notre Dame. Bama's got a real problem on offense, and if they're not scoring defensively, they're going to be in some trouble, as we saw this past weekend against South Florida, who they should have beaten by fucking 50. Bama of yore would have beaten the brakes off South Florida, because that's not a good South Florida team anymore either.
Yes,
they've lost a lot of good coaches, and they've lost a lot of the recruiting pool that they used to get there. They used to get a lot of athletes, a lot of good defensive players, but they don't have that anymore.
I'm hesitant to agree with you there. I'm not as quick to bury the king as a lot of people, right? I think that Nick Saban historically has been one of the most adaptable coaches we've ever seen, right? People know that Nick Saban is willing to change. He changed from the 96 national championship game that he won against LSU to a win his in 45-38 or something like that against Clemson. Like, Nick Saban is a chameleon on the sideline, right? Mm-hmm. His biggest strength throughout the years has been able to keep and develop talent. This freaking team that he has is so young. I don't think they have anybody older than a junior starting or playing wide receiver, let alone starting. They start a true freshman at safety. Both of their tackles were 360 plus pounds, or true
True
freshmen.
freshman.
I think they have 2 sophomores at running back, right? And then Jalen
Yep.
Milrow, they're going to have to address the quarterback, right? Like they just do. That's something that they're going to have to address. But that goes back to my chameleon point, right? If you think for a second that Nick Saban is not going to go out and hit that transfer portal so hard to try to find some quarterback, maybe the kid from Colorado State, who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah, like if you think that he's not going to go out there and try to find a top tier quarterback looking for a place to come next year, maybe Arch Manning. Who knows? Maybe Quinn Ewers doesn't feel ready to go to the NFL yet. I don't know. But they also have, I believe he was like the fourth highest rated recruit in his class behind. He's a true freshman quarterback. So whatever ranking, whatever class we're talking about there, I believe he was the number 4 overall recruit. And he left high school early, so he's like a year early at Alabama or whatever. But he's a true freshman. He hasn't played he's obviously not in the answer this year. But if Nick Saban is able to develop him the way that he did Hurts and Tua and Mac Jones and guys like that, I mean, I think it would be foolish to say that this is the end of the Alabama era. I just think that in this new age of college football, other teams are able to catch up more quickly. But that plays right into the hands of Nick Saban, who has been a chameleon for so long, that if he's able to, because he hasn't had to use the transfer portal, right? That really only became a thing whenever he had Tua, Mac Jones, and then the kid who went Bryce Young, right? So he's had these stud quarterbacks and he's had all these stud receivers that he recruited and was able to retain. Who's to say that he doesn't adapt one more time and adapt this NIL transfer portal type deal?
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I believe Holstein is the one you're referencing in terms of and they actually ended up getting 2. I knew it was Eli something and I couldn't place it, but Eli Holstein, and they've got that Lonergan kid too, who was fairly highly rated.
Kyle Lonergan, is that his name?
Dylan, I believe.
Dylan, yeah, that's the one I was talking about. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they've got 2 guys that as freshmen for sure. It's this season, I think, is going to be a challenge, right? And I think you're absolutely right. Saban's probably going to hit the transfer portal, or he's going to have to figure out if he's got something in either Holstein or Lonergan before next season. Because they are so young, and I'm not burying the king. I don't think Saban's done. I don't think Bama's going to collapse. I think we're probably 4 or 5 years from that, and before we start to see the kind of wheels fall off. Because I think Saban's going to retire probably in the next half decade. And I don't know who comes in there to keep that ship rolling or floating.
Yeah.
We've seen this at major programs in all collegiate sports, right? Across, basketball, football, even baseball, right? If you're a college baseball fan at all, LSU struggled for a little bit when they lost. They had that coach there that was uber successful for like 25, 27 years.
Yeah.
It's hard to replace people like that, especially with the way you run a program. So I'm not burying Saban anytime soon. I just think this season they have a real problem on offense. Now, all that being said, exactly how you said it, those 2 tackles are going to get better. They're going to figure out the quarterback position because it's fucking Alabama.
Yep.
Those wide receivers are going to get seasoned, and you're going to see them start to make plays because they are talented.
Yes.
They're just not ready like guys like Devontae Smith and Mechie and all those guys, Judy and everybody else has been for the last handful of years that they've been able to, as you put it perfectly, be a chameleon and turn it into a high-powered, explosive offense. You're not going to get 6-3 in the national title game, right, from this team. You're not going to get 6-3 in the national title game from the NCAA, right. Anymore. But yeah, you're spot on that this isn't a requiem on Alabama's demise. This is a bump in the road because they had to go from maybe their best quarterback in program history in terms of Bryce Young and what he was able to do, winning the national title and winning Heisman and yada yada, to what's next.
Yeah.
Right. And I think with them going out to the transfer portal to get Buckner and try to bring someone in to compete with Milrow, I think they knew, right, that they didn't necessarily have it in Jalen Milrow. So probably one of those 2 freshmen, I think, will be the guy next year. And you're going to see Saban, who is very, very good at player development, turn this into the next 2 or 3 years, look out, because Bama's probably going to be fucking back on top in the SEC.
Exhibit A, 2010 location, Columbia, South Carolina, Williams-Brice Stadium. One wide receiver by the name of Alshon Jeffrey did anything he wanted as a fourth-year junior against a true freshman cornerback. I was in the house. I watched it live in person. South Carolina won that game. 3 years later, that true freshman, first-round draft pick in the NFL.
Yep.
Developing players. That's what Nick Saban does.
Yep. That's what he does. All right. What else you got from this coming week do you really want? We got some really good matchups this week. I want to highlight that, right? For all that we didn't necessarily have last week with super intriguing matchups, we had a couple interesting Vegas lines last week. We did get a couple of upsets of ranked teams. We've got some ranked on ranked matchups this week.
Yes.
We've got some heavy hitters in terms of name recognition matching up this week. Give me a game you're looking at here that you want to highlight for this coming week.
All right. I'm going to go outside of a ranked matchup. I'm going to go to Rutgers at Michigan. Rutgers is 3-0. Also 3-0 against the spread. Michigan is 0-3 against the spread this year. They are a 24-point favorite at home. You texted me during the Michigan game this weekend and said, when is Michigan going to start bullying these bad teams? And I said, well, it's probably going to be when they stop turning the ball over.
Yeah.
I don't think that's this week.
Probably not.
Rutgers has a freaking stud athlete at quarterback. Yep. Their offense hums up and down that field.
Yep.
It would not shock me if we see a very close game. It would shock me if Michigan covers. But I'm going to take the 24 points from Rutgers because that is a lot of points. Michigan has not impressed me a ton, but Rutgers has.
Yeah, I picked Michigan. I know you.
I picked Michigan, but I made the picks and then I looked at all these teams against the spread this year. So I'm going to right now declare that I'm taking Rutgers.
I'll update it for next week's show so you get credit for it. I'm still going to lay the points. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment here because I have bet Michigan 2 out of the 3 weeks against the spread and lost on them. I'm still going to lay the points this week. I think maybe I'm too confident. Harbaugh is going to get this turnover problem under control.
Yeah.
I say all that, and I'm the guy that used to shit on fucking JJ McCarthy and all the fucking turnovers that he had, and then they end up going with him, and I just Harbaugh's going to get it under control. I think they're going
to win.
Yeah, but are they going to cover?
Wow.
I'm gonna bet them to cover, or I'm gonna pick them to cover.
All right.
Knowing that I'm asking for trouble again.
Yep.
If they don't turn the ball over 3 times this week, they'll cover. That's the big thing. They have to stop turning the ball over. But even then, you mentioned it. They got an offense. Rutgers has an offense. We look at Rutgers, I think, as college football fans and say, like, that's a bad brand since Schiano left for the NFL.
Yeah.
And that kind of fell apart there post Ray Rice days. Schiano's back.
Back.
It looks like he's building a little something there. It's taken him a couple years to make a statement, but they're 3-0 and they've earned all 3 wins. They haven't played the greatest of competition necessarily, but that offense can be fucking problematic. So you're probably right to flip your pick. But I'm gonna stick and probably get bit in the ass. All right, let's look. Is there one more you want to highlight before we get to our totem?
Yeah, so I have a ticket. I'm looking at it right now. I got Notre Dame at +3.5. The line has moved to +3, so I'm glad I got the hook there before they moved that line. Notre Dame is 3-0 against the spread. I did say probably the first show that we did this program that I would never pick Notre Dame to win a big game. And after I just gave Ohio State all those kudos for kind of figuring out this offense. That being said, I lay so much credence to the home team having the home field advantage because I've been to these games. I've seen, not Notre Dame, but I've been to SEC night games. I've been to Virginia Tech on a Thursday night. I've seen the home crowd effect. It makes a difference.
Yep.
The Ohio State quarterback does not have the experience on the road that he's going to need going into a stadium like this. And if Notre Dame can get their run game going like they have been able to all year long, I think that they can give problems to that Ohio State defense. I really, really do. I know they have super young and inexperienced receivers, but I really think if they're able to get that run game going, I think that Sam Hartman has enough a wherewithal to be able to continue to be able to pass the ball like he has so far this season.
Yep. I'm going to get back to my brother's comment about Duke in just a moment. I kind of want your perspective on that as well. No. We'll jump back to that, but I want to highlight here because this is the big thing that I talked about when we did our season preview, and we talked about Notre Dame going into week 1. I felt like, because I really like Sam Hartman. I enjoy watching him. I thought he was a great quarterback at Wake Forest. I thought he was going to get some Heisman hype before he got injured last year.
Yeah.
I love what Sam Hartman does. He's tough as fucking nails, savvy vet, 5th-year guy, been starting for fucking ever. And he's got that Notre Dame offense moving up and down the field, something that they haven't been able to do in, 2 decades, really. They've relied heavily on defense and, as you put it, the run game, right? They've always kind of had that. Now they've got a guy that can move this team in 3rd and long situations, can convert.
Right.
They haven't had that in the past. I really like what they're doing, and for me, that's why I took them over Ohio State. I think they're going to be able to move the ball against this Ohio State defense because of Sam Hartman and what he brings to the table for that offense. And that Notre Dame defense is real.
Yes.
Couple stumbles on some kind of quirky plays last week against Central Michigan that made that game 21-14 at half, but then they ran away in the second half. And that defense is real. They've got talent at all 3 levels, and I think they're going to give McCord and that Ohio State offense some trouble this coming weekend. All right, I want to talk real quick about Duke. Let's jump into this,
Sure.
and then we'll do our totem before we got to kind of kick rocks here before 8. But you see Duke playing in a New Year's Day bowl game?
I would. Everybody here who has watched the NBA show knows that I'm a Duke fanboy. This is, however, the college football show where I root for South Carolina. I would love to see Duke play in a New Year's Bowl. However, they play Notre Dame, Florida State, North Carolina still on their schedule. Those are 3 games that are tough. And Wake Forest, too. Like, on a Thursday night, that's no pushover either. Wake Forest can be frisky on any given week. They're not a great team, but they can be a frisky team, right? I would love to see Duke be very good and continue this winning streak. Give me a guess without looking up, Gary, how many passing touchdowns they have this year. Through 3 games where they have scored 28, 42, and 38 points.
I feel like this is a trap question, so I'm going to say 6.
They have 1 passing touchdown this year. They have 1 passing touchdown and 12 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, I know that the quarterback, his name's fucking eluding me right now, but
Riley Leonard.
Yeah. He's got like 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns himself, I believe. I know he had two against Clemson, so
he has 3.
He has 3 on the season. So that is surprising though, because all of the talk has been about Riley Leonard and who he is and what he can do. And they got a heck of a run game, but is that going to be enough to get them to a New Year's Day bowl game? You mentioned it, right? Closing the season is going to be tough for them. They've got 3 hammers on their schedule. So it would be cool. It would be neat to see Duke get a New Year's Day bowl game. New teams getting those bowl games. It's always fun.
I will say, sorry to cut you off, but I will say, so Notre Dame plays Ohio State. They host Ohio State this weekend, Saturday night game, primetime, big deal, right, on NBC. Next weekend, they play Duke at Duke.
Yeah. That could be a trap. Host Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, if Notre Dame win or lose, preferably if they win, like if Notre Dame wins this weekend, typically we see college teams have a letdown week the weekend after. Like you texted me during the Texas game.
Yeah,
they were tied going into the fourth quarter, and then they put up 21 in the fourth. But like, if Notre Dame wins this weekend impressively, or even a close game, right? That could be a trap going game because it's a night game on ABC. You know, College Game Day will probably be No, game day. Where's game day next weekend? Is it going to be at is it going to be Colorado Southern Cal? Probably. But
I don't think
that's
so.
a
That's a
noon
noon game.
kickoff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't usually do those noon kickoffs. I think the
Yeah.
earliest they've ever done is a 4 o'clock where like Appalachian State, but
Right. Who knows?
I don't know.
Maybe they
I
go
don't
to
really-
Duke.
Maybe.
Maybe they go to Raleigh and game day's there and it's a big freaking deal and Duke gets all hyped up like they did for the Clemson game and they won that game. I don't know. That could be a trap game next week. That could be a trap game. I have my eye on that one.
Yep.
There's no line for that yet.
Yep, for sure. All right, well, let's finish up. We didn't have a lot of movement in the totem this week. I kind of want to get your thoughts because yours didn't change at all. I flip-flopped Texas and Florida State after Florida State really struggled with BC. Texas struggled a bit as well with Wyoming, but I think they closed out better than Florida State did. So I flip-flopped them. Otherwise, same 12 in terms of ranks here.
Yeah.
Is there anyone on here that scares you in your top 6, right? Is it somebody in your top 4 that scares you that might not stick around, or is it somebody there lingering, Penn State, USC lingering, on the outside looking in, one of them going to drop the ball?
I have a sneaking suspicion that Michigan will not end of the year in my totem. I don't love what's going on there, but I have to leave them there because they were in the playoff last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They have the pedigree, they have the coach, they got the running game, and they have the defense so far. Until they lose, I can't knock them out.
Yeah.
I really, really, really want to put Southern Cal in there. I really, 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 really want to put Washington in there. I really, really, really want to put Penn State in there.
Yeah.
But I'm not taking out Georgia. I'm not taking out Texas. And I think Florida State has the best win of the year so far, especially after LSU went out and put up 41 this past weekend.
Yep. Yeah, Texas thought for a minute they were going to have the best one, and then Alabama laid that egg against Southern Florida. So.
But a night win at Tuscaloosa still ranks like top 3 best win.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. It's what night game at Utah, night game at LSU, night game at Tuscaloosa. Like,
yeah, it's right around that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, night game at Willie B is probably number 1 because nobody wins in South Carolina except for South Carolina. But
yeah, one note for me, I almost put Notre Dame in over Florida State. I talked myself out of it because I didn't want to shit on Florida State as much as I really for a moment was going to for that BC near loss. I almost did make that change, but in the end, Florida State still has the best win of the year. You put it the right way, right? That win over LSU, especially the way LSU bounced back, put up fucking half a hundy almost. Against a tough SEC opponent, right? That's not a pushover non-conference game. That's
right.
Mississippi State in Starkville, right?
Yes.
That's a tough place to play as well. So I ended up leaving that one alone because I realized I was being a little spiteful about Florida State. So I was like, I can't go that far. Can't go that far. But
that's fair.
They scare me the most though, because I go back to the beginning of the season. I didn't have a lot of confidence in Florida State at the beginning of the season. They proved me wrong with the win over LSU, but I'm still a little scared with Florida State that we might see them drop a game that they shouldn't, because they did it in the BC game. They can check out at times. They did it last year quite a bit, and they did it in that BC game, and that scares me, that they can check out and lose a game that they really shouldn't lose against like a fucking, I don't know, they're going to lose to like fucking, I don't know, North Carolina State, I don't know. Drop one of those stupid games that they shouldn't.
They could lose to Duke.
Could lose to Duke, right? Duke's tough to begin with. They just seem like, I don't know yet. They scare me. They scare me the most out of the 6 teams that I have in. And you mentioned Washington. Like, every week we've done this. I've tried to talk myself into Washington over somebody.
Yep.
But I just can't do it because Caleb Williams still plays in SC. And I think Notre Dame, with that defense and having a quarterback finally, I think that they are tough. So Auburn, Georgia, week 5.
It will not be there. It will probably be LSU at Ole Miss, 6 o'clock kickoff.
Especially if Ole Miss knocks off Bama this week.
Yep.
That would.
Or hear me out. South Carolina goes to Knoxville. Rematch of the Spencer Rattler game.
Yep. Yeah, we remember that from last year.
Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 touchdowns, baby. We ran out of freaking fireworks at Willie B.
Yep, for sure. All right, bud. Well, let's bring this one to a close. Great episode. Any closing thoughts for us as we check out here for a action-packed, it seems, weekend in the top 25 especially?
Yeah, I don't know what the over-under is for that Iowa-Penn State game, but it's a night game at Penn State. Nobody scores a lot of points in those games. And Iowa's defense is for real, and their offense kind of sucks. Whatever the over-under, it is 40 and a half.
I was going to say, I think it was 40, but 40 and a half.
It's 40 and a half. You may want to play that at like 42 and a half, but I would buy those 2 points and play the under there. Hell, I might play the under at 40 and a half. But there, I do not expect a lot of scoring. Iowa's defense is for real. It always is, and they don't score a lot of points.
Yeah, for sure. All right, bud. Well, appreciate you. For everybody here at Backyard Sports, we appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate the comments. Really love the interaction.
Yep.
We'll see y'all next week. We are out.